Hello, I'm the Trinket Mage, and this is my tier list for all Dominaria United commanders. This is for the main set and everything in the precon as well. I'm going to start with Dijada, Binder of Wills. Red, white, black, and 1 for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. She says, +2. Up to 1 target legendary creature gains Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible until your next turn. Or -3, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put any number of legendary cards from among them into your hand, the rest go to the graveyard, and you make a treasure for each card put into the graveyard this way. -11, gain control of all non-land permanents. Until end of turn, untap them. They gain haste. This card's really cool. Super sweet, super powerful, very fun, like legendary tribal. I think you can also do like aristocrats or maybe an artifact theme, just milling over things and making treasures. It's pretty strong. I like this card a lot. Next is Kadric, Soul Kindler. 2 red-white for a 4/3 Dwarf Wizard. That says the legend rule does not apply to tokens you control. And whenever a non-token legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a token that's a copy of it. That token gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. This card's really interesting. You can do a lot of like the red, make a token copy of something cards, and just make like copies of legendary creatures with like death triggers. Something like the new dragons from Kamigawa, those would be pretty good. It seems fun, seems kind of interesting. I don't know how useful it is at the end of the day. There's some cool things you can do with it, but it's not super powerful. Then we got Varric, Warped Sengir. 1 white-black for a 2/2 vampire with flying, death touch, and lifelink. Whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, if life was paid to activate it, you pay that much life again. If you do, copy the ability, choose new targets for it. This card's really interesting. I'm not exactly sure what you do with it, because the best thing to pay life with in the format right now is Necropotence, which this doesn't really help you with. It is fun that your fetch lands will now like grab 2 swamps or 2 plains. That's kind of cool. Otherwise, I don't know, doesn't seem that good, but it is definitely unique. So I'll give it that. Next is the Peregrine Dynamo. 3 mana for a 1/5 legendary artifact creature construct. With haste, that says pay 1 tap, copy target activated or triggered ability from another legendary source that is not a commander. You may choose their targets for the commander. This card is interesting. I think ultimately it's kind of bad. You can't use it to double up your commander's abilities, which kind of sucks. And as a commander, it feels worse than just like Tawanos. So, I don't know. It doesn't seem too great. I would say you can play it in Super Friends, because all your Planeswalkers are legendary, but otherwise, it's not that great. And even there, it's not amazing. Next is Jared Kartheleon. Wooburg for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. That says, +1, create a 3/3 Kavu with trample that's all colors. -3, choose up to 2 target creatures for each one of them, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each of its colors. And the ultimate is just a -6. Return target multicolored card from your graveyard to your hand. If that card was all colors, create 2 treasure tokens and draw a card. I think this card's really neat. It kind of focuses on like having creatures of multiple colors. It makes 3/3s with trample that he can pump up 2 8/8s anyway. Pretty strong, pretty interesting, very unique. I think this is a cool idea for like 5 color +1/+1 counters as well, because you can actually put a lot of counters on things. I think it's pretty cool. I like this one. Now, Emperor Male II. Blue 1 for a 3/3 Merfolk Noble. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast Merfolk spells from the top card of your library. When you cast a Merfolk spell, you may pay 1. If you do, make a 1/1. This is pretty neat. It's decent, it's card draw, it makes dudes. It's a pretty powerful commander for Merfolk, but at this point, being in a mono blue is a little limiting. I think you really do want green to add the other like green Merfolk. So I think this is really a more better than 99 kind of card. Don't get me wrong, it's decent, but the lack of colors just holds it back. Now, Rosknat, Heir of Rorga, 1 red for a 0/1 Cobalt Warrior with Battlecry. And Heroic. When you target it with a spell, you create a 0/1 Cobalt, named Cobalt's a Care Keep. This card's pretty cool. It's like a Mono red heroic. It also helps you like anthem your team. It makes kobolds. I honestly think it's more of a 99 card. I don't think it does the heroic type stuff better than Zada does, and it's a worse kobold commander than another one we'll see later in this video. Now, Baru Wormspeaker. Green 2 for a 3/3 human druid. Worms you control get +2/+2 and have trample. Then you can pay 7 generic and 1 green to make a 4/4 worm. This ability costs X less to activate, where X is the greatest power among worms you control. This card's cool. It's fun. You know, it's worm tribal. It would be really good if it was in white, but in mono green, it's still decent. And honestly, if you make 1 worm with his ability, the next worm only costs like 2, and just making 6/6s with a trample every turn is not that bad. Next is another mono green commander, Greensleeves Marrow Sorcerer. 3 generic green for a star elemental, with protection from wizards and planeswalkers. Greensleeves' power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, and when a land enters the battlefield, you make a 3/3 badger. So as far as like landfall goes, it's fine. You know, it's kind of like a worse Omnath Locus of Rage. It's a decent card. I wouldn't pick it as my landfall commander. For Badger Tribal, I really just don't think there's enough Badgers to like make this work. Hopefully in the future we get some more Badger support, and then maybe this could be a cool Badger commander. Next, Aisha Tanaka Armorer. 3 white-blue for a 2/4. Legendary creature, Human Artificer. When it attacks, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, put any number of artifacts with mana value less than or equal to Aisha's power onto the battlefield tapped, and put the rest on the bottom. Then, cannot be blocked if your opponent has 3 or more artifacts. This card's awesome. I love this card. If you think about it, it's almost impossible to block. Like, having 3 or more artifacts, you're gonna have an opponent to hit with. So it's pretty close to unblockable. And even if you don't pump up the power that much, just hitting artifact lands, soul rings, signet, that's pretty decent. Next is Jensen Kartheleon, Druid Exile. Green-white for a 2/2 human druid. When you cast a multicolored spell, scry 1. If it was all colors, make a 4/4 with flying and vigilance. And then you can pay 5 generic to filter into Wurberg. This card, I think it kind of sucks. I don't know how often you're going to be getting a 4/4 with this, like maybe once or twice a game, maybe 3 times. It seems pretty meh. I mean, how many Wurberg cards can you really fit in your deck before it actually, becomes too much? I think this card's ultimately pretty bad. Next we have the Everchangingdane, a shapeshifter 3/3 for white, blue, black. That says, pay 1, sacrifice another creature. The Everchangingdane becomes a copy of the sacrificed creature, except it has this ability. This card's so sweet. I want to play this with a bunch of like theft style cards. Like, there's a decent amount of stuff in blue that lets you steal creatures for a turn, steal their biggest creature, turn your commander into that, and just like start hitting face. Seems like a lot of fun. Seems like a really cool cloned theft commander, and I'm all about that. Next is General Marshalt Elsdragon. Green-red 2 for a 4/4 elf warrior. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, it gets +3/+3 until end of turn for each creature blocking it. This card sucks. Like, yeah, it's kind of funny with lore, and then everybody has to block the one thing, but it's really just some filler uncommon. I wouldn't play it. Now we got Hazazon, Shaper of Sand. Red, green, white for a 3/3 human warrior with Desert Walk. And you may play desert lands from your graveyard. And when a desert enters the battlefield under your control, create 2 1/1 Naya colored tokens. This card's so sweet. This is like one of my favorites. I love landfall shenanigans, and Desert Fall, super sweet. You get all the cycling deserts, the deserts that let you sacrifice other deserts to use different effects. There's tons of cool synergies you can do with this. I love this card. And if you really want to like crank up the power level, this card's really good with land destruction. Blow up all the lands, replay your deserts, hit people with the 1/1s. It's pretty strong. Now we got Jedit, Ojaman Mercenary. Blue-white 1 for a 3/3 cat mercenary. Whenever it or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay a green. If you do, you make a 2/2 cat with Forest Walk. And this card's terrible. I wish it was like legendary permanence, because then you would get, you know, some more, but like it's only legendary creatures and you just get like a 2/2. It really kind of sucks. I don't know. I wouldn't put it in anything. The Lady Otaria. Red-green 3 for a 5/5 avatar. You may tap 3 untapped dwarves rather than paying the spell's mana cost. At the beginning of each end step, if a land was put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put any dwarves from among them into your hand, the rest on the bottom. So this is Dwarf Tribal, but the problem is, like, comparing this to Magda is way more powerful and lets you do a lot of extra things, and green, I believe, literally only adds 1 dwarf to the deck. If we get some more green dwarves, this could be an interesting decision, but as of now, I don't even think this is the best Dwarf Tribal commander. Ohabi Kellerida is a really interesting card. Green-white 1 for an elf archer 1/3. Has reach, and untap all archers you control during each other player's untap step. Whenever an archer you control deals damage to a creature, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. This card's really interesting. Like, it's obviously the best archer tribal commander, but at the same time, there's a couple of really cool things you can do with it. If you have something like Cryptolith Rite, which allows you to tap all your creatures for mana, you can tap all your archers for mana and then they untap on each turn. That's kind of neat. I'm not exactly sure how good it is, but there's some fun shenanigans you can do with this card. Maybe with a Glare of Subdual? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. Next is Ramirez de Pietro Pillager. 2 blue-black for a 4/3 human pirate. When it enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life, make 2 treasures. And when 1 or more pirates deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of their library, you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. This card's like a better than the 99 card for sure. It's fine, you know, but you really want red for pirates, and also you want more colors for this card. It doesn't let you color fix the cards that you stole, so only being in 2 colors is actually a pretty big downside. Next is Ramses Assassin Lord. Blue-black 2 for a 4/4 human assassin with Death Touch. Other assassins you control get +1/+1. Whenever a player loses the game, if they were attacked by an assassin you control, you win the game. This card's sweet. Like, what a cool card. Honestly, I love alternate win conditions, and it just really, you know, makes that, like, assassin feel, you know, even more impactful, because you really are just, like, assassinating the whole table at that point. Super sweet card, super neat. I really can't wait to give this one a try. Then we got Shanid, Sleeper's Scourge. Martyr in 1 for a 2/4 human knight with Menace. Other legendary creatures you control have Menace. Whenever you play a legendary land or cast a legendary spell, draw a card and lose a life. This card's really powerful. If you're playing the precon out of the box, I actually think I would just play her over the face commander. The extra card draw is really strong, especially on lands as well. Honestly, if you want to play Mardu Legends, I think this is probably the best one. The new Rasputin the Oreomancer is 1 blue-white for 4/3. Human wizard enters the battlefield with a counter on it for each opponent you have. Each opponent also makes a 1/1 goblin. Then you can tap remove 1 or more counters to add that much colorless. Or you can tap and remove 1 counter to make a 2/2 with red. This card's awful. Don't play it. It's really bad. Rorga, Carekeep Overlord, is black-red 3 for a 4/4 Kobold Warrior that gives other Kobolds +2/+2. And when you cast a Kobold, you may pay 2 generic. If you do, make a 4/4 Dragon with Flying. And whenever you cast a Dragon, you get to make a Kobold. And this card is super cool. I really like this Dragon, Kobold kind of deck that you get to make. Super fun, and if you cast any of the 0 mana Kobolds, you can just pay 2 to get like a 4/4 flyer. Super crazy value. I think you could actually make like a pretty sweet, pretty powerful deck out of this. Staying Echo Warrior is a Grulin 2 3/4 human warrior. When it attacks, you make a legendary 3/4 red and green token named Staying Twin that's tapped and attacking, and the twin gets a copy of all the auras and enchantments that are on the original Staying. So this card's kind of neat. You get to double up on your equipment and your auras. What I really like is using Sundial of the Infinite to end the turn and keep the Stang around and all the copies of the equipments. So next time you attack with your Stang, your Stang twin will die, but you're going to get more copies of the equipments. And then you can attach the equipment copies to the original Stang to make even more copies of it. It seems like a ton of fun. I think it would take a lot to actually set up and put all those things together, but if you pull that off and you're making 2 sort of fire and ices or something like that, man, that's sweet. That's the dream right there. Savitri Dragonmaster is a 4-mana Dimir Planeswalker. It starts with 4 loyalty, and it has +1 until your next turn. Creatures can't attack you or Planeswalkers you control, unless they pay 2 life for each of those creatures. And -3 lets you search your library for a dragon, reveal it, put it in your hand. And -7, destroy all non-dragon creatures. So this card's pretty bad. It's good in the 99 of dragon decks, because it tutors up dragons. It's also not bad in Super Friends Pillow Fort decks, because it does have a Pillow Forty kind of effect. But I wouldn't put this in the command zone. Tetsuo Imperial Champion might be the coolest card. It's Grixis for a 3/3 Human Samurai. When Tetsuo attacks, you choose one. Either deal damage equal to the highest mana value among equipment attached to Tetsuo, or cast an instant or sorcery with mana value less than or equal to the highest mana value of equipment attached to Tetsuo, without paying its mana cost. This card's awesome. I love this card. You get to just play equipment, pump it up, cheat spells into play, and as soon as you get a 4 or 5 cost equipment onto it, like a Batter Skull, you're already casting 5 drops from your hand for free or dealing 5 to something. That's awesome. You really don't need that many equipments for this to be crazy. I think this card looks like a ton of fun. I really want to brew around with it. Tobias Doomed Conqueror is doomed to be a bad card. It's a 4-mana Azorius 3/2 Human Soldier with Flash. When it dies, for each non-token creature that died this turn, you make a 2/2. It sucks, especially as your commander. The power of an effect like this is because it's a surprise, but if it's in your command zone, it's not a surprise to anyone, so just don't play it. Poor Wookie the Younger is a 5-mana Rakdos Legend, a 3/3 Human Archer with Reach and Lifelink. If another source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much +1. And then, when you cast an instant or sorcery, Tor will deal 2 damage to any target. This card's awesome. It's like Rakdos Spellslinger, but it also pumps up the damage of your damaging spells. This is a proper burn commander. I really like this. I'm gonna put it here in the unique tier for now, because I don't think it's that strong, but man, do I want to give this a try. I love Rakdos control, and this seems like a great way to play it. Torsten, Founder of Benalia, is a 7-mana Selesnya 7/7 Human Soldier. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Put any number of creatures from among them into your hand, or lands from among them into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom. And then, when Torsten dies, create 7/1/1 soldiers. This card's kind of neat. I think it's really better in the 99. So I think if you're in the 99 of some sort of Blink or Reanimator type deck that's creature focused, I think this is pretty powerful. Zyria the Golden Sting is Jundin 1 for a 3/3 Insect Assassin with Flying and Haste. When Zyria attacks, you put an egg counter on another target creature without an egg counter on it. When that creature dies, draw a card and put a 1/1 black insect with flying onto the battlefield. So this card's sweet, actually. Honestly, really cool. It's a delayed trigger, so if your commander dies, you still draw and make tokens from the egg counters, which is pretty neat. It's a cool kind of aristocracy sort of sacrifice style deck. You can put it on your opponents, you can put it on your creatures and sacrifice them for value. Plus, the art for the token is really great, so I love this thing. Big fan. Zerem the Golden Wind is 3 and a white for a 3/4 Griffon with Flying. When a Griffon deals combat damage to a player, make a 2/2 Griffon with Flying. This is kind of neat. It's Dwarf Tribal. It sort of pumps, or it doesn't pump up your Griffons, but it gives you a lot of them and lets you actually make more of them. It's pretty neat. I don't know if it's the best Griffon commander. because I think Zuberi Golden Feathers just being like a lord in the command zone is pretty good, but it's definitely not bad. And if you want to play Griffins, you know, go for it. Moira Herberghant is a 3-mana black 3/2 Spirit Wizard with Menace, and when he deals combat damage to a player, return to the battlefield target creature from your graveyard that was put to the battlefield this turn. This card's quite bad. I wouldn't play it. Like, if you think about it, it needs to connect, and the creature had to already be on the battlefield and die. So, like, it only lets you, like, cheat ETBs if you've already cheated the creature in, like, once, or already cast it once. It's not great, and only having Menace isn't the best, you know, way to get through. It's just kind of, it's not good. Bladewing Deathless Tyrant is a 7-mana Rakdos legend with 6/6 Flying Haste, Dragon Skeleton. When it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, for each creature in your graveyard, put a 2/2 zombie knight with Menace. This card's pretty sweet. I think it's better than 99 ultimately, as like the top end finisher of a deck. You know, this is something you might want to reanimate, or hopefully you're in more colors so you get blue for like better self-milling type effects. But ultimately, the card's pretty powerful. Having haste means it does something immediately, and that's pretty nice. So I'm a fan. Next we got the Raven Man, a 2-mana 2/1 for black and 1. Human wizard. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discards a card this turn, make a 1/1 black bird with flying, and this creature can't block. Plus, you can pay 4, tap, each opponent discards a card, activate only as a sorcery. This card's like a 99 card. As far as discard commanders goes, it doesn't force your opponents to discard that many cards. It is a payoff because you make 1/1s, but they can't block, which is kind of meh. So I think it might just be like you throw it in the 99 of your discard deck as a way to make each opponent discard, plus you incidentally make some 1/1s. Next is Shieldred the Apocalypse. Black 2 for a 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor with Death Touch, and whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. I think this might be the most overhyped card in the set. It's like, it's not good as your commander. Like, actively, I don't think this is good as a commander. You have like 1 wheel in mono black, and that's it. And like, yeah, I know you can peer through depths to just like kill a player with it, and that's kind of funny, but that's not that good. And like mono black life gain, like there's not that many payoffs. In the 99 of a life gain deck or a wheel deck, this card's excellent. Throw this in your Nekusars, throw this in your other life gain decks. But don't put this in the command zone, it's not going to be that good, trust me. Next is Squee Dubious Monarch, a 3-mana 2/2 Goblin Noble with haste. When it attacks, you make a 1/1, and when it dies, you can pay red and 3 and exile 4 cards from your library, from your graveyard, to cast him. This card's for standard, it's not for EDH. Next is Danitha, Benalia's Hope, a white and 4 for a 4/4 human knight with First Strike, Vigilance, Lifelink. And when Danitha enters the battlefield, put an aura equipment from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to it. This card's pretty neat. I don't know if it's like great as far as like Voltron goes. It is fun to cheat some bigger equipment onto it and hit your opponent. It's cool. Probably not better than SRAM or something, but you know, it's a mono white. What can you expect? Now we got Aaron Benalia's Ruin. White black for a 3/3 human Phyrexian. He has Menace and pay a black and a white. Sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I think, like, as far as, like, go-wide, tokeny decks, it's not the best in Orzhov. It is interesting that it puts counters on them, so you could lean into that, although most of the counter synergies is in green. So, you know, maybe put this in the 99 of your Abzan counters deck. That would be pretty sweet. Then we got Aster, Bearer of Blades. Boros and 2 for a 4/4 human warrior. When Aster enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle from among them, put in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Equipments have an equip cost of 1, and vehicles have a crew cost of 1. So this is neat. I think that the vehicle part is like kind of meh, because most vehicles have a crew cost of 3 or less, so he could already crew almost anything by himself anyway. But the equip cost of 1 is pretty interesting. And I think that puts it in the unique tier for me. Next is Barid, Argivian Recruiter. Boros for a 2/2 human soldier. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, make a 1/1. So if you have any static Anthem effect, it basically makes a 1/1 every turn. It's like a fine token generator. It'll probably be a good budget card. You know, it just makes something every turn. It's not bad. Then we got Balmor, Battle Mage Captain. Is it for a 1/3 flyer? Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, creatures you control get +1/+0 and trample until end of turn. So this is kind of interesting. It's like a go wide is it deck. Giving your whole team trample is pretty strong, but it doesn't like make the tokens, right? You need to find your token producers and get those. I think this deck has existed for a little while. You know, you play like your Tolerant type effects, cantrip, 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 make a bunch of things, swing out with them. Almost all of the token generators for that, though, do make flyers, so I don't know how relevant the trample is. Honestly, I think this might be better like in the 99 of Elas. Yeah, it doesn't seem too great as the commander itself. The next one, Vorturk Bone Rattle, is a 6-mana Golgari Troll Shaman. It's a 4/4 with Domain. ETB, you choose a creature card in your graveyard. You reanimate it if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of basic land types you have, or it goes to your hand. Also, it has a clause, so it only triggers this if you cast Vorturk. So this card's pretty bad. So in Commander, you're not going to be able to hit the Domain very easily. Plus, you can't flicker it or anything. I don't know. This card sucks. I wouldn't play it. Now we have Elas Ilcor, Sadistic Pilgrim, a 2/2 Phyrexian Core Cleric for black and white. Has Death Touch, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life. And whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. This card's pretty sweet. It's kind of like a Blood Artist sort of effect, but it also can gain you life. I think it's better in the 99 of like an Aristocrat style deck, but ultimately decently powerful. I wouldn't be surprised to see it in the command zone, but I think it's more better in the 99. Ertai the Resurrected is probably my most disappointing card from the set. Blue-black 2 for a 3/2 human Phyrexian wizard. It has flash. When it enters the battlefield, you choose 1. Counter a spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, its controller draws a card. Destroy another target creature or planeswalker, its controller draws a card. This sucks. Card quality in EDH is so high that giving your opponents the ability to draw cards is generally pretty dangerous. And like, we have like just like regular counter spells and like mana drain in the format. Having a 4-mana counter spell that draws your opponent a card is terrible. Don't play this. Next we have Garna, Blood Fists of Keld. Black, red, red 1 for a 4/3 human berserker. Whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's kind of cool. It's like a little Blood Artist, and then if a creature attacked and died, you get to draw cards. Very similar to our Sadistic Pilgrim here. It's kind of like a Blood Artist effect. You can play it in the 99 of any Aristocrats deck. Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief is green-blue for a 2/1 Fairy Rogue with flying. When a player casts a spell that only targets a single creature other than Ivy, you may copy the spell, and the copy targets Ivy. This card's really neat. I like this a lot. So it does let you copy auras, which is pretty cool. So you kind of play like a Enchantress deck where you just put all your things on one creature and you get to double up your auras onto your commander. It's pretty cool, pretty unique, I think pretty strong as well. You can definitely do some pretty powerful shenanigans with it. A pretty cool card. I think I'd like it as a very different way for Simic to go, rather than just Value Town. Joyra Ageless Innovator. Blue-red for a 2/3. Human Artificer. Tap, put 2 Ingenuity counters on Joyra. Then you may put an artifact with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of Ingenuity counters on Joyra. That's awesome. I love this card. Being able to just slam down Ingenuity counters and just cheat out big artifacts is so good. And if you can untap this, oh my god. It's crazy strong. I'm definitely going to have to give Joyra a try. I love these kind of artifact cards. Joda the Unifier is Wooburg for a 5/5 human wizard. Gives a legendary creature you control +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control, which counts himself, so he's always a 6/6. And whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a legendary non-land card with lower mana value, then you may cast it. So basically, it lets your legends cascade for other legends. This is pretty cool. I think it's a very cool 5-color Legends Matters kind of card. I think it's pretty interesting. You just play a lot of legendary creatures. You want big ones to cascade into. I think it's a lot of fun. I'd definitely give it a try. Next is King Darien the 48th. Green white 1 for a 2/3 human soldier. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. You can then pay green white 3, put a +1/+1 counter on Darien, and make a 1/1. Then you can sacrifice Darien to give all your creatures hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is pretty neat. You know, I think it's like a decently powerful Selesnya tokens commander. It does all of the things you want it to. It's an anthem, it makes the tokens, it protects the tokens. Pretty strong, all in all, I think. It's, you know, somewhat boring. I sort of resent putting it in the fun category because I think it's not a very interesting commander, but it is pretty powerful. Lagomos Hand of Hatred is black-red 1 for a 1/3 human shaman. Then beginning a combat on your turn, make a 2/1 elemental with trample and haste, sack it at the end step. And then you can tap, search your library for any card. But you can only activate this if 5 or more creatures die this turn. So this is pretty cool because it doesn't say 5 of your creatures. If you play things that force your opponents to sacrifice a creature, forcing each opponent's sack of creatures, already getting rid of 3, you can sack the 2/1, that's 4. If you use the Fleshbag Martyr for this, you're sacking a creature 2, that's 5, boom, you can tutor. Honestly, it's pretty powerful and pretty interesting. I think as far as like a Rakdos force your opponents to sacrifice kind of deck, it's pretty cool. And being able to tutor a lot with that, it seems pretty powerful. I think there's a few too many hoops to jump through to actually like get the tutoring, so I wouldn't put it in the top tier, but it's decent nonetheless. Maria, Scholar of Antiquity, is a card I already talked about in a short. I'll have a little icon pop up for that. But basically, you can tap your artifacts for mana, and you can tap 2 artifacts, like exile the top card and cast it. This card's nuts. It doesn't let you tap tokens, but it's still really good. You still get to tap like Winter Orb and Static Orb to break parity. It's kind of like a Gruul version of Urza, where you have access to these sort of stacks pieces. It's very powerful. This card, I think, is really scary. Next is Nail Evizoa Aeronaut. Blue-green 2 for a 2/4 flyer with Domain. And to save a little bit of time, I'm going to put this in the trash tier. It has Domain, so as your commander, it's pretty much useless because it's very difficult to hit all the types. Najail the Stormrunner is 2 blue-blue-red for a 5/4 Efreet Wizard. You may cast sorceries as though they had flash, and whenever it attacks, you may pay 2 generic. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. This card's pretty sweet. I think it's a more in the 99 card, but I really like copying instant sorceries. It's one of my favorite things, and this is a decent way to do it. Namada Primeval Warden. Black-green 2 for a 3/4 tree folk. It has reach, and whenever an opponent's creature dies, exile it and make a 1/1 green sapling. Plus, you can pay a green, sacrifice a sapling, give it +2/+2 until end of turn, or pay black and 1, sack 2 saplings, draw a card. This card's pretty good. Incidental Graveyard Hate on your commander is pretty powerful. Combine this with effects like Grave Pact that force each opponent to sacrifice, you're going to be destroying their boards, making tons of 1/1s, and then sacrificing all those, making your commander huge. It's pretty powerful. I like this card a lot, actually. Queen Elena of Rorga is green, white, white for a star elf noble. Power and toughness equal to the number of creatures you control. And if you would make 1 or more creature tokens, make that many +1. This card's fine. You know, you put it in the 99 of your token deck. Otherwise, just having like a big creature with no keywords is kind of meh. And it's not a token doubler, it only adds 1. So you really want instances of tokens being created, not making a ton in one go. So keep that in mind. Rada Coalition Warlord is another domain commander that isn't very good in commander. So it's for standard. Wrath Weatherlight Steward is blue-white for a 1/3 legendary creature human wizard. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures, If you do, draw a card. And then pay 3 white. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. So this card's kind of interesting. It's like Azorius Go Wide interesting. I don't know how many other Azorius Go Wide decks there really are. Ultimately not that powerful, but it's kind of neat. Radarabik of Urborg is black, white, and 2 for a 3/3 zombie wizard with vigilance and ward 2. Other zombies you control have vigilance. Then, whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 2/2 zombie and not legendary. Holy cow, this card's awesome. So for starters, it doesn't exile the card. You can just loop the same legendary creature to make like a bunch of copies of it. There's so many shenanigans you can do with this deck that I can make a whole 30-minute video just on this card. Just take a look at other legends in the colors, and I'm sure you'll find a dozen interesting, cool things to do. With Liberated Primeval is green, white, red, and 2 for a 5/5 dragon with flying and ward 2. Plus other dragons you control have ward 2. And at the beginning of your end step, if a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls was dealt excess damage, you make a 4/4 dragon with flying. So this card's pretty powerful. Honestly, excess damage doesn't even have to be from spells. Just if they blocked one of your big creatures, then you get a 4/4 flying with ward 2. It's super powerful. This thing will really snowball, making 4/4s every turn. Honestly, just a really good card. And you could also just go Dragon Tribal, which is pretty good. Rivaz of the Claw is black-red 1 for a 3/3 Vinishinu Warlock with Menace. Tap to add 2 mana of any color combination. You can only use this to cast dragons. Once per turn, you may cast a dragon spell from your graveyard. And when you cast a dragon from your graveyard, it has, if it dies, exile it. This card's better than 99. I think Rakdos Dragons is a little weak, a little lacking, but if you're in 5-color dragons, this card's great. Rona Shieldreds Faithful is 1 blue, black, black for a 3/4 human wizard. When you cast an instant or sorcery, each opponent loses a life. You may cast Rona from the graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying other costs. This card kind of sucks. It's not very good. Yeah, if you went infinite with like Isochron Scepter, because you can get the cast triggers, you can like kill the whole table, but there's a lot of commanders that win the game if you go infinite with Isochron Scepter, so I'm not super impressed. Rulikman's Warren Chief, red, green, green, and 1 for a 3/3 Goblin with Menace. When it attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, it goes on the battlefield tap. If it's not a land, then you make a 1/1 Goblin. This card's like, I mean, you put it like in the 99 of Goblin Tribal. I don't even know if you're going to play it as goblins. I don't know. Red-green Goblin Tribal seems kind of bad. The mono-red goblins are so powerful. I don't know if you want this as the commander. And green doesn't give you enough to make it worth it. Shana Purifying Blade is Bant for a 3/3 human warrior with lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay X. If you do, draw X cards. X cannot be greater than the amount of life that you gain this turn. This is just the best Bant life gain commander. It draws cards for life gain. If you can get in with it and just hit for 3, you can just pay 3, draw 3. It's pretty good. Honestly, the card's just decent. There aren't really any bad things to say about it. So if you want to play Bant life gain, give it a go. Solkanar the Tainted is Grixis in 2 for a 5/5 elemental demon. With, at the beginning of your end step, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Draw a card. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Solkanar deals 3 damage to another creature or planeswalker, and exile Solkanar, return it to the battlefield tapped under an opponent's control. So this card's pretty neat. A very crucial thing, if you blink Solkanar, you reset the abilities. You want to play this with like Conjurer's Closet, so you can blink Solkanar each turn, and then you get to just choose a different ability every turn, and you never have to give it to an opponent. Solar Windgrace is Jund 1 for a 5/4 cat avatar that has, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, put a land from your graveyard on the battlefield tapped, and pay green, discard a land, gain 3 life. Pay red and 1, discard a land, draw a card. Pay black and 2, discard a land, tap Soul Windgrace, it gains indestructible. This card's just good. It gets your lands back. You can cycle your lands for pretty much any effect you want. If you have bounce lands, you can discard them, attack, put it back in your hand, and then just keep using the same lands over and over again. This card's crazy strong, and It's a 5/4. You can just attack, then give it indestructible, and you can punch face pretty well. Sten, Paranoid Partisan, is blue and white for a human wizard 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, choose a card type other than creature or land. Spells with the chosen type cost 1 less. And then you can pay blue-white 1 to exile it and then return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. This card's kind of neat. It's kind of like an Azorius Spellslinger deck. You can choose instants, make your instants cost 1 less. Choose sorceries, make your sorceries cost 1 less. Or artifacts, enchantments. It's kind of cool. I think artifacts is probably the best place to put it, because if you're doing the other things, I think Grand Arbiter Augustine is just better. But you can go infinite with him with Sensei's Divining Top and Future Sight. And that's a pretty decent, like, 3-card combo. So, I don't know. Seems not bad. Tatiova, Steward of Ties is green-green-blue for a 3/3 Merfolk Druid. Lands you control have flying, and when a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, choose up to 1 target land to become a 3/3 elemental creature token with haste. This card's kind of neat. It's sort of like a Field of the Dead, where it's, instead of making a 2/2, it's basically turning the land into a 3/3, which is worse, but it still lets you turn your lands into damage. It's kind of fun with Scape Shift, where you can have a bunch of lands, scape shift them all, turn them all into 3/3s, and just like swing out and attack someone. It's pretty neat. I think you would want a lot of effects that make your creatures or lands indestructible, just to make sure you don't lose all your lands to a board wipe. But it's kind of a cool card, and again, kind of like Ivy, it's a different way for Simic to go, and I kind of like that. Tori de Averant Fury Rider is 1 red-red-white for a 3/3 human knight with vigilance and trample. When it attacks, all other attacking creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. Red creatures get trample, white creatures get to untap. This card's probably better than the 99 of some sort of Boros Go-Wide deck. It's just kind of makes your creatures a little bigger and a little better, but it's just a 3/3 on its own, so it doesn't do anything by itself, and it doesn't give you any reward other than like a little bit of extra damage. Tura Kenard Sky Knight is 2 white blue for 3/3 human knight with flying. When you cast an instant or sorcery, create a 1/1 soldier. I kind of like this. It's sort of like Talrand, where you're just making little doofy creatures for all the spells that you cast. Granted, the soldiers don't have flying and they're only 1/1s, but you have access to white, which does give you a lot of other pretty useful and powerful cards. So I think it's pretty decent. If you're a Talrand player, I would consider slashing white, giving this a go. Next is Urg, Spawn of Turg. Green-green-black for a star 5 frog beast. Power equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library, you may put it in your graveyard. Pay a black and green, sacrifice a land, gain 2 life. This card sucks. It's good in exactly the Gitrog monster, and that's about it. Great name though. Vohar Voldaren Desecrator is blue-black for a 1/2. Phyrexian Merfolk Wizard. You may tap, draw a card, discard a card. If you discard an instant or sorcery, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Then you can pay 2 generic, sacrifice it. You may cast target instant or sorcery from your graveyard this turn. If that spell will be put to a graveyard, it gets exiled instead. I actually think this is the most powerful commander in the set in terms of like commander as a whole. In CDH, this is a great card. You use Demonic Consultation, and it's a 1-card win condition. Because you have your commander out, you Consultation for Oracle, Thassa's Oracle, and then you use your commander to flashback the Demonic Consultation, cast the Oracle, win the game. It's pretty good. You just need to find 1 card and you win the game. In terms of like casual high power EDH, which is sort of what I'm focused on here, I think it's pretty neat. It's still a powerful card. I think if you're not all in on the Oracle plan, it's pretty, you can do some other interesting things. You can do High Tide shenanigans or, you know, busted things with like Time Walk effects. It's still pretty powerful, I think. And a pretty neat card. I like it a lot. Now we got Zar Ogenin, Scion of Ephrava. Another domain card. It's not designed for Commander. I wouldn't play it. Zur Eternal Schemer is white, blue, black for a human wizard with flying. It's a 1/4. And it gives enchantment creatures you control Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. Then you can pay white and 1, target non-aura enchantment you control. Becomes a creature in addition to its other types. and has base power and toughness equals its mana value. This card's awesome. It's really cool. It's kind of like a lot of these artifact commanders we've seen that let you like animate artifacts, but with enchantments. Super interesting, really fun card. I'm a big fan. Jasmine Boreal of the Seven is green-white 1 for 2/4 human druid. You may tap, add green-white. Spend this mana only to cast creatures with no abilities, and creatures you control with no abilities can't be blocked by creatures with abilities. This card's awesome. It's not super powerful, but it is really cool. Normal creature tribal. It's super fun. I mean, this is just a cool card. What else can I say about it? Orca Siege Demon is a 7-mana Rakdos 5/5 demon with trample. And whenever another creature dies, put a counter on it. Then when it dies, you deal damage equal to its power divided as you choose among any number of targets. This card's not very good. I'm going to say better than the 99 instead of trash, just because if you did go infinite, you could loop it and win the game, which is fine, I guess. But, I don't know, this card's pretty bad for 7 mana. And last but certainly not least, is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. 1 black for 3/3, legendary creature Nightmare. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent sacrifices a permanent that shares a type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. This card's awesome. You can do some pretty interesting stack stuff with it. You play the land that you can pay 3 mana to bring it back from the graveyard. You sacrifice a land. Each opponent who doesn't want to sack a land will lose 2 life and you draw like 3 cards. Seems really powerful. Super cool for sacrifice type deck. I'm a big fan. I already have a friend of mine that built it, so I can't wait to play against it. And that's my tier list for all of the new cards from Dominaria United. What do you think? Am I missing anything? Or any of these, especially the ones down here, am I missing something about these that makes them like super broken? I'd love to know. Let me know what your favorites are as well. And thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.